Drake could not make this jump shot in the Laugh Now Cry Later music video. The camera keeps cutting away before we see him clearly airball. So I used 3D visual effects to help BBL Drizzy's jumper. It took me about 17 hours to make, and 17 is also the age that Drake. It's maybe too far. Also, I do want to note I am not a professional VFX artist, so I'm gonna be putting the J in janky in this one. Any help or guidance is always appreciated.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6.
I motion track the footage in Blender using the 3D camera solver. Now, this 720p rip of the music video is not ideal quality for tracking, so just put the maximum amount of tracking dots. Especially on the net, because that's where we're doing our simulation and we need things to be the most sticky. There are almost no high contrast locations on the ground, so I just put them on the ceiling and prayed. I removed any of the obviously wonky tracks, and I did a solve cleaner for errors above 1. Rerun the solve, clean it up, run the solve again, clean it up, add more tracks, rerun the solve, clean it up, add more tracks, rerun the solve, run the solve backwards, clean it up, and so on. Eventually, I did get the solve error down to 0.24, and we're not making the Avengers here, so that's good enough for me. Now that we're happy with the camera tracks, set the video as the background and set up the tracking scene. Now, I want to be clear, this has never once worked for me. If you know what I'm doing wrong, please comment it down below. It would be appreciated. But I do think I have a pretty clever workaround. I jump into Fspy, an amazing free Blender add-on. I found a behind-the-scenes still from the shoot, so I asked Ben, "Yo, what camera is this?" Looks like an Alexa Mini LF. Google the sensor size and adjust the focal length until it looks correct. You open a still and drag these lines onto an X, Y, or Z axis. And now it will automatically set the correct distance and perspective when you go back to Blender. I mean, Fspy is just unbeatable. I place the Fspy project into the camera solve that we just made. And if we take the Fspy camera, which is perfectly in perspective, we can just add the camera solver constraint, which will match the movement perfectly. Pretty nasty workaround, huh? To recap, we now have our 3D camera perfectly matching the perspective, movement, and distance of the original camera in the music video. So any 3D object we add into the scene will match the movement and perspective of the original video. Going Autismo 4000 on this one. I also made a basketball net to match the one in the video, but I am not a 3D modeler, so I am not going to walk through the process of making that. It literally brought me to my breaking point. Add a cloth modifier, pin group to the rim, add object collisions, self collisions, and it's alive! I found a pretty similar basketball to Drake's made by Nightbox, and it was already perfectly textured and shaded, so I left it as is. I remembered I needed to extend the shot as the original ends before it makes contact. So I did a content-aware fill on the existing net as it was just easier to remove it entirely. I also tried the new generative extend in Premiere so that they would keep moving long enough for the shot to land. We'll leave the feature in the oven a little longer, but with some manual tracking and color correction, it will do the trick this time around. I added a 2D ball that I just manually keyframed that sort of matched where the propulsion would have gone. As when you're watching this back in Blender, it's playing at like 1 frame a second. It's hard to know if things are moving in the right time. I mean, how nicely is everything sticking here? I added a rigid body constraint to the ball, the backboard, and the floor planes. Manually keyframe the ball to match the existing until the original footage runs out, and then I run the simulation. Also, don't forget to click the shadow catcher box so that the shadows get rendered in the final scene, because I forgot to do that. I did remember, however, to add a light to the scene to try and closely match the original shot. Now, if we turn off the animation on the final keyframe, the simulation and propulsion will cause the ball to continue its momentum, eventually flying into our net's claw simulation, bouncing off the backboard, then bouncing on the ground and not casting a shadow because we forgot. I just want to note that the cloth simulation was a f***ing nightmare. It just kept going sicko mode every time I ran the simulation. I tried every combination of different forces, weights, single-sided, linear, caching, uncaching, friction. It eventually kind of worked, but I have no advice for making it look nice. What you see here took about 17 tries, but again, 17 is Drake's. I color correct the net and the ball, and then I manually add the shadows in Premiere. I duplicate the ball bouncing layer and then flip it vertically. This will be our reflection on the floor plane. Set the blending mode to soft light and then turn down its opacity. I could have done the ray tracing reflections in Blender, but my graphics card just simply can't handle that, so what are you gonna do? However, you gotta give it to me. This is pretty convincing. I added some sound effects and we're done. Okay, I'm not gonna be working on the Avengers anytime soon, but this video was incredibly fun to make. And Lil Durk got arrested halfway through the making of this video, so don't really have anything to say about that. Just before I go, I did a test project trying out this camera solving method. I put a statue of Drake into Young and Dundas Square. Kinda funny, but it obviously doesn't look real. I still posted it just to add it to the library. 30,000 views.
What the fuck? I was in Toronto yesterday. Why is it built to be child height? What the fuck? I was there yesterday, didn't see shit. I was there and I saw it. It will be covered in feces in no time. No hate, but that's just the state of Toronto nowadays.